Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story. The late afternoon sun filtered through the bedroom curtains, casting golden stripes across the rumpled sheets where James Carver and his secretary Olivia lay entwined. They'd been careless today, coming to his home instead of the discreet hotel they usually frequented. But James's growing resentment toward his pregnant wife had made him reckless, almost wanting to be caught in some subconscious desire to escape the commitment looming before him. When the bedroom door swung open, revealing Sophia's silhouette, time seemed to freeze. Olivia gasped, clutching sheets to her naked body, but James felt a strange calm wash over him. The inevitable had finally arrived. Sophia stood perfectly still, one hand instinctively cradling her 6-month pregnant belly, her beautiful features shifting from shock to pain to something worse, resignation, as if she'd secretly suspected this all along. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken accusations and betrayal. James noticed how the afternoon light caught the wedding band on Sophia's finger, the same ring he'd slipped on with promises of forever just 3 years earlier. Her eyes, usually warm and expressive, had gone flat, with shock pupils dilated against her dark irises. He could see the rapid rise and fall of her chest as she struggled to control her breathing, to maintain the dignity that was so intrinsically part of her character. "Sophia," James said finally, his voice oddly detached even to his own ears. "You're home early." Clearly, she replied, her melodic voice steady despite the slight trembling of her full lips. The doctor's appointment didn't take as long as expected. Olivia scrambled for her clothes, mumbling incoherent apologies. James made no move to cover himself, instead watching his wife with something like defiance in his eyes. He'd been raised to believe Carver men took what they wanted, consequences be damned. His father had operated that way throughout James's childhood, his mother turning a blind eye to countless indiscretions. Now caught in his betrayal, some dormant part of James's privileged upbringing surfaced like a monster from the deep. "You should wait downstairs," he told Olivia, who fled the room, clutching her rumpled business attire heels dangling from her fingers. Alone with his wife, James expected screaming tears, the drama he'd witnessed in friends' divorces. Instead, Sophia's quiet dignity unsettled him, her dark eyes regarding him with a sorrow so profound it triggered his defensiveness. "Say something," he demanded, pulling on his pants, unable to bear her silent judgment. "What should I say?" Sophia asked softly, one hand still protective over their unborn child. What could possibly matter now? Something in her calm response ignited a sudden irrational anger in James. This poised, beautiful woman had once been his greatest achievement, the talented, gorgeous wife who chose him despite her family's reservations about the cultural differences. Now her growing belly and the impending responsibility of fatherhood felt like shackles. The pregnancy had dominated their conversations for months, her body changing her attention, shifting away from him and his needs. Jealousy, an emotion he'd never admit to feeling toward his own unborn child, twisted inside him like a venomous snake. "Maybe you should ask yourself why this happened," he snapped, buttoning his shirt with jerky movements. "You're hardly present in this marriage anymore. It's all about the baby, the nursery, the future. What about us? What about me?" Sophia's face registered the blow, but she maintained her composure. "I didn't realize loving our child meant losing you." Her reasonableness only fueled James's desperate need to hurt her, to make her feel as out of control as he suddenly did. Words formed in his throat, vicious words he'd never consciously thought, but that now poured out like poison. "What did you expect? Look at yourself. You're fat and disgusting now. I haven't been attracted to you in months." James watched the words land like physical blows, but couldn't stop himself. "I never even wanted this baby. It was always your obsession, not mine. Maybe you should have focused more on being my wife than becoming a mother." The moment the words left his mouth, James felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. He didn't mean them, not really. The vicious statement hung in the air between them, impossible to retract. But Sophia's face transformed before his eyes, the last light of hope extinguishing as she absorbed his cruelty. Something vital seemed to fracture behind her eyes. Trust, perhaps, or love. Something that he suddenly realized was irreplaceable. She took one step back, then another, her hand still protectively cradling their child, as if shielding it from his verbal assault. Her skin had gone ashen beneath its warm brown tones, and for a moment James feared she might faint. The physical manifestation of her emotional wound pierced through his anger, leaving him abruptly hollow. "Sophia, one." He began, suddenly desperate to retract everything, but his pride strangled the apology in his throat. His upbringing had never prepared him for sincere contrition. Carver men didn't apologize. They justified, explained away, or simply moved forward. This fundamental flaw in his character This inability to humble himself, even when he knew he was catastrophically wrong, would cost him everything. Though he couldn't yet comprehend the magnitude of what was slipping through his fingers. "I see," she said, simply, her voice hollow. "Thank you for your honesty." She turned and walked away, her shoulders straight, despite the visible weight of his words. James stood frozen, listening to her measured footsteps down the hallway, too proud to follow, too ashamed to call out, telling himself she needed time to cool down, that they would talk later when emotions weren't so raw. That night he slept in the guest room, giving her space. He heard her moving around occasionally, the soft opening and closing of drawers, but convinced himself this was just another marital spat that would resolve by morning. He rehearsed apologies in his head, but never rose to deliver them, pride and shame wrestling beneath his skin. Surely she would understand once her emotions settled. Surely she would recognize that pregnancy had changed their dynamic, that he needed attention too. In the darkness he justified his actions with the entitlement that had been his birthright as a Carver heir, pushing away the voice of conscience that whispered he had crossed an unforgivable line. When dawn broke, James woke to an unnaturally quiet house. In the kitchen, perfectly centered on the marble island, lay a manila envelope. Inside he found divorce papers already signed in Sophia's elegant handwriting. Her wedding ring sat atop them, a small golden circle that had once symbolized their future. Reality crashed down as he frantically searched the house, finding her clothes gone, her toiletries missing, the nursery they'd painted together just weeks ago, now a yellow-walled monument to what might have been. The speed and decisiveness of her departure stunned him. Sophia had always been methodical, taking time with major decisions. That she had left so quickly, so completely, revealed the depth of the wound he'd inflicted. He tried her cell phone repeatedly, each unanswered ring increasing his panic. The voicemail greeting her, warm musical voice promising to return the call, felt like a taunt now. After a dozen attempts, he found her number had been disconnected entirely. With growing desperation, he called her closest friend, who responded with icy fury before hanging up on him. Finally, fighting rising nausea, he called her parents' home. Her father answered, his normally warm voice now cold as ice. The older man had always treated James with respect, despite initial reservations about his daughter marrying outside their culture. That hard-won respect had evaporated, replaced by the righteous anger of a father whose child had been harmed. "She doesn't want to speak with you, Mr. Bennett stated flatly. "Mr. Bennett, please, I need to explain." "Explain what?" "How you broke my daughter's heart when she's carrying your child. How you made her feel worthless when she's giving you the greatest gift a woman can offer." The older man's voice cracked slightly. "You've destroyed something precious, James. Don't call again." The line went dead, leaving James alone in their spacious home that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. He wandered into the nursery, running his fingers along the crib they'd assembled together. Sophia laughing at his frustration with the instructions. He recalled her excitement in choosing the perfect shade of yellow, not too bright, not too pale a color, that feels like morning sunshine, she'd explained, with characteristic thoughtfulness. They'd spent an entire weekend painting together, planning their future between brushstrokes, discussing names and dreams for their child. Now those dreams lay shattered around him like broken glass. He picked up a small stuffed bear from the rocking chair, a gift from Sophia's brother that had arrived with a card welcoming James to their family. The soft toy in his hands represented everything he'd destroyed, with a few moments of weakness and cruel words. Collapsing onto the rocking chair, surrounded by stuffed animals and yellow walls that had once represented hope, the full weight of what he'd done finally crashed over him. The carefully constructed persona he'd maintained throughout his privileged life, confident, entitled, unapologetic, crumbled completely, leaving only raw truth behind. He had wounded the one person who had loved him unconditionally, driven her away when she was most vulnerable, and rejected the child they had created together. As morning light streamed through the windows, James Carver, who'd never begged for anything in his privileged life, bent forward in the empty nursery and wept. The echo of his cruel words played endlessly in his mind. The rocking motion of the chair purchased for Sophia to nurse their baby became a rhythmic accompaniment to his grief, marking the beginning of regret that would shape the rest of his life. Chapter 2: Failed Escape. 6 months later, James sat stone-faced in the courtroom as the divorce proceedings concluded with mechanical efficiency. His lawyer had advised fighting for assets, arguing that Sophia's emotional state during pregnancy made her demands excessive. James had fired him on the spot, hiring someone who would simply facilitate, giving Sophia everything she asked for without contest. The courtroom felt sterile and cold, nothing like the warm judicial chambers he'd imagined when obtaining their marriage license years earlier. The same legal system that had joined them was now efficiently severing their connection. reducing years of intimacy to property divisions and custody arrangements. James had signed away his parental rights without protest, a decision that would haunt him for years to come, but that he couldn't bring himself to fight in the moment. His shame was too raw, his guilt too overwhelming to imagine arguing for the privilege of fatherhood after what he'd done. Across the polished wooden table, Sophia sat beside her attorney, her pregnancy now in its final month, her belly full and round beneath a simple navy dress. She never once met James's desperate gaze, her eyes focused on the documents before her or on her lawyer's face when he spoke. The only sign of emotion was the slight trembling of her hand as she signed the final papers. Her composed exterior revealed nothing of their shared history, nothing of the nights they'd spent planning their future, the Sunday mornings reading the paper in bed, the holidays with their blended families gradually warming to their union. James searched her face for any hint of the woman who had once looked at him with such love but found only a carefully constructed mask of indifference. The diamond ring he'd placed on her finger, his grandmother's reset with sapphires to match Sophia's favorite color, was conspicuously absent, likely sold or stored away as a painful reminder of broken promises. When the judge announced their marriage officially dissolved, James felt a physical pain in his chest, as if something vital had been surgically removed. He watched Sophia rise carefully, her brother Daniel appearing from the gallery to support her elbow as they exited. James took a half-step toward them before his own attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm, shaking his head slightly. The message was clear. She didn't want him anywhere near her. Back in the mansion they'd once shared, James poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, staring out at the manicured garden where they'd once hosted summer parties. Friends had already chosen sides, most dropping away from James once word of his betrayal spread. Their absence meant nothing compared to the gaping void Sophia had left. The house echoed with memories. Sophia's laughter floating up the staircase, the soft melodies she'd play on the baby grand piano in the sitting room, her perfume lingering in rooms she hadn't entered in months. James drained his glass, the alcohol burning a path down his throat that couldn't begin to match the fire of his regret. He wandered from room to room, a ghost in his own home. In their walk-in closet, a single silk scarf remained overlooked in Sophia's hasty departure, and James found himself burying his face in it, inhaling the fading scent of her perfume. The nursery they'd painted together remained exactly as she'd left it. The crib assembled but never used stuffed animals arranged on shelves that would gather dust rather than childhood memories. These physical remnants of their life together and the future they'd planned were almost unbearable. Yet James couldn't bring himself to change anything, as if preserving these spaces might somehow preserve the possibility of her return. When his phone rang, he answered without checking the caller, hoping against reason it might be Sophia. "James, it's Natalie." The sultry voice of his marketing director filled the line. They'd flirted harmlessly for months before his affair with Olivia. Unlike his secretary, Natalie was his equal, sophisticated, ambitious, and currently very available. "I heard about the divorce being finalized today. Thought you might need some company." 40 minutes later, her sports car purred into his circular driveway. James greeted her at the door, taking in her perfectly styled blonde hair, the red dress that hugged every curve, the sympathy in her blue eyes that didn't quite mask her predatory interest. "You, poor thing," she cooed, running manicured fingers along his jawline, alone in this big house. "Let me help you forget, just for tonight." James led her upstairs, telling himself this was exactly what he needed to move on, to prove to himself that life continued. In his bedroom, Natalie kissed him hungrily skilled hands, unbuttoning his shirt. He responded mechanically, muscle memory guiding his actions while his mind remained detached. As she unfastened his belt, James caught sight of a framed photograph he'd forgotten to remove. Sophia at the piano head, thrown back in laughter, her eyes meeting the camera with such love it seemed to reach through the glass. The sight of her beautiful face, her dark eyes shining, hit him like a physical blow. Natalie was unfastening his belt when he gently caught her wrists. "I can't," he said, surprised by the roughness in his voice. "I'm sorry." She straightened, confusion and frustration crossing her features. "You're still hung up on her after she took you to the cleaners." "She took what was already hers," James responded, stepping away and rebuttoning his shirt with unsteady fingers. "And yes, I'm still hung up on her." Natalie's sympathy hardened to irritation. "Call me when you're actually ready to move on," she said, gathering her purse. "I don't have time for men who can't commit to their affairs or their rebounds." After showing her out, James returned to the bar, pouring another drink he couldn't taste. His phone buzzed with a text from his closest remaining friend, "Heard about today." "You okay?" He left it unanswered, unable to articulate the hollow ache in his chest. Across town in her parents' comfortable home, Sophia Bennett Carver, now legally just Bennett again, felt the first contraction ripple across her abdomen. She'd been experiencing practice contractions for weeks, but this one felt different, sharper, more insistent. "Mom," she called, trying to keep the panic from her voice, "I think it's starting." Her mother rushed in calm efficiency, replacing the worry that had shadowed her face since Sophia returned home 6 months ago, heart shattered and belly growing. "I'll call your father and Daniel. Let's time these contractions before we head to the hospital." An hour later, as the contractions intensified, Sophia was helped into her brother's car. Despite everything, as another wave of pain washed over her, she found herself wishing for James's hand to hold his voice, assuring her everything would be all right. The instinct to call him was so strong she had to physically sit on her hand to prevent herself from reaching for her phone. "You don't need him," Daniel said correctly, reading her expression as he navigated toward the hospital. "You have us. You're the strongest woman I know, Sophia." Sophia nodded, tears filling her eyes, not from the physical pain, but from the realization that her child would take their first breath in a world already fractured, their family broken before it fully formed. Meanwhile, James sat alone in his study, unaware his child was beginning their journey into the world. A private investigator he'd hired had informed him which hospital Sophia would deliver at, and he'd anonymously arranged for her to have the best suite available, the finest doctors on call. It was a pathetic gesture, he knew, but the only way he could participate in the birth of his child. Around midnight, restlessness drove him from the house. He found himself driving aimlessly through the city, until, as if guided by instinct, he arrived at the hospital. Parking across the street, James sat in his car, staring up at the brightly lit maternity floor, wondering which window contained his wife. Ex-wife now. And soon his child. The night wore on James, dozing occasionally in the uncomfortable driver's seat, unwilling to leave. Dawn was breaking when his phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. "Baby girl, 6 pounds, mother and child. Doing well." A daughter. He had a daughter. James's vision blurred with tears as he continued his vigil, waiting through the morning until visiting hours began, watching the hospital entrance. Shortly after noon, he spotted them, Sophia in a wheelchair, holding a small bundle, Daniel pushing her chair, her parents flanking them protectively, as a nurse helped them into a waiting car. Even from a distance, James could see Sophia's exhausted radiance, the tender way she cradled their daughter, her face bent to the tiny bundle. For one breathtaking moment, she looked up, her gaze sweeping the street, as if sensing his presence. James shrank down in his seat, not wanting to intrude on this moment, not deserving to share in the joy his cruelty had excluded him from. As their car pulled away, James started his engine, following at a discreet distance to his in-laws' neighborhood, making a mental note of the exact house. He wouldn't approach, not yet, but he needed to know where his daughter would sleep tonight. Back at his empty mansion, James found himself drawn once again to the nursery, standing in the doorway. He made a silent promise to the daughter he hadn't met, whose name he didn't yet know somehow. Someday he would find a way to be worthy of her, and if Sophia could never forgive him, he would understand. But he would spend every day of his life trying to earn back a place in theirs, no matter how small. Chapter 3. Hollow Existence. 1 year after the divorce, James Carver's life had become a study in contrast. To the outside world, he projected success and recovery, expanding his business empire, appearing at charity events with practiced smiles, maintaining the facade expected of a man of his position. In private, he existed in a perpetual state of emptiness, his sprawling mansion echoing with absence. The routine he'd established felt like moving through quicksand each day, requiring immense effort for the most basic functions. Mornings began with coffee on the terrace where he and Sophia once planned their days together. Work provided temporary distraction, his natural business acumen functioning on autopilot. While his emotional life remained frozen in amber, evenings were the worst, the hours stretching before him with no purpose beyond sleep that rarely came easily. He'd sold their shared bed, unable to face its emptiness night after night, but found little comfort in its replacement. Sometimes he slept in his office instead, surrounded by work that at least provided some sense of accomplishment in a life that otherwise felt meaningless. On a crisp autumn morning, James found himself in an unfamiliar part of the city, attending a business conference at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The conference itself held little interest. Market projections and investment strategies that once would have captured his full attention now barely registered. He found himself checking his watch repeatedly, counting minutes until he could politely leave without drawing attention. As the keynote speaker droned on about market trends, James's attention wandered to a striking woman 3 rows ahead, Emily Harper, the marketing director from a competing firm. Her confident posture and occasional incisive questions revealed an intelligence that reminded him painfully of Sophia. Throughout the day, he caught her glancing his way, interest evident in her appraising gaze. Under different circumstances in his previous life, he might have enjoyed the subtle dance of professional flirtation. Now it merely emphasized the hollow space within him where desire used to live. At the evening reception, she approached directly, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "You look like you could use this," she said, offering him a glass. Almost as bored as I was during that blockchain presentation. Emily was everything his social circle would approve of. Intelligent, ambitious, and breathtakingly beautiful, with her auburn hair and confident smile. Their conversation flowed effortlessly through dinner professional topics, giving way to more personal exchanges. When she suggested continuing their discussion in her hotel room, James accepted without hesitation. "I'm in town just for the conference," she explained, as the elevator ascended. No strings, no complications, just 2 adults enjoying each other's company. In her suite, Emily kissed him with practiced expertise, her hands confidently unbuttoning his shirt. James responded automatically, telling himself, this was healthy, necessary. A step toward reclaiming his life. Yet, as her fingers traced his chest, Sophia's face appeared unbidden in his mind, not as she'd looked at the divorce proceedings, but on their wedding day, eyes shining with promise, as she vowed herself to him forever. Emily was unfastening his belt when James felt a wave of nausea rise from the pit of his stomach. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping back abruptly. "I can't do this." "You're kidding," Emily said, straightening her dress with an incredulous expression. "I thought we were on the same page here." "We were. I thought so too." James ran a hand through his hair, embarrassment heating his face. "I'm still in love with my ex-wife. I shouldn't have led you on." Emily's irritation softened slightly. "At least you're honest. Most men would have gone through with it anyway," she sighed, gathering her professional demeanor like a shield. "Your loss, James. I hope she's worth it." After a sleepless night in his own room, James checked out early and drove aimlessly through the city, eventually finding himself in a modest neighborhood across town. Before he could question his actions, he was parking down the street from the Bennett family home, where Sophia had returned after leaving him. This wasn't the first time he'd come. Every few weeks, like a moth to a flame, he was drawn to this quiet street, hoping for glimpses of the family that should have been his. Today, fortune favored his vigil. The front door opened, and Sophia emerged, pushing a stroller. James's heart contracted painfully at the sight of her, even more beautiful than in his tortured memories. Her figure had returned to its pre-pregnancy elegance, her movements graceful as she navigated the porch steps. Slumped low in his car, he watched her walk toward the neighborhood park, unaware of his presence. Waiting until she was a safe distance ahead, James followed on foot, maintaining enough separation to avoid detection while keeping them in sight. At the small playground, Sophia lifted their daughter from the stroller, and James got his first clear view of the child he'd never met. His throat tightened as he observed her from behind a nearby tree. She had Sophia's beautiful brown skin and delicate features, but unmistakably, his eyes wide and curious as she took in the world around her. For over an hour he stood frozen, watching Sophia sing to their daughter as she pushed her on the infant swing, the child's delighted giggles carrying on the breeze. When the little girl stumbled while taking tentative steps across the grass, Sophia swept her up with such tenderness that James had to look away. The intimacy of the moment was too painful to witness. This was what he had thrown away with his cruelty, not just Sophia's love, but these precious moments with his daughter, whose name he still didn't know. Seeing them together, their obvious bond, the careful way Sophia protected and nurtured their child, made the magnitude of his loss feel overwhelming. As they prepared to leave, the little girl dropped a toy, and it rolled toward James's hiding place. Before he could retreat, Sophia approached to retrieve it, coming within 15 feet of where he stood. For a heart-stopping moment, he thought she'd seen him, her head turning slightly in his direction, but she merely collected the toy and returned to the stroller, securing their daughter before heading home. That night, alone in his study, James found himself doing something he hadn't attempted since their separation. He painted. Art had been their connection, once Sophia's music inspiring his rarely indulged talent for watercolors. Working until dawn, he created a piece from memory, his daughter on the swing, face alight with joy, Sophia's hands securely holding her. He would never display it, never show it to anyone, but creating. It felt like preserving a moment he had no right to claim but couldn't bear to lose. The following week, after another sleepless night haunted by thoughts of Sophia and their child, James accepted his friend Thomas's suggestion to meet for drinks at an upscale bar. Thomas, recently divorced himself, had been urging James to get back in the game for months. "You need to move on, man." Thomas insisted, signaling the bartender for another round. "It's been a year. Plenty of women would kill to land James Carver." "I'm not interested," James replied, the familiar refrain worn smooth with repetition. Because you haven't given anyone a chance. Thomas nodded toward a stunning blonde at the end of the bar. That woman has been checking you out for 20 minutes. At least buy her a drink. To silence his friend more than anything, James approached the woman Lauren, a flight attendant with a 3-day layover and an engaging smile. Their conversation was pleasant, her interest obvious. When she suggested continuing their evening at her hotel, James hesitated only briefly before agreeing. This time he was determined to go through with it to prove to himself that he could move forward. In her room, their kisses deepened, their bodies responding naturally to each other. Yet the moment things progressed to true intimacy, James found himself physically unable to continue his body, betraying his desperate attempt to connect with someone other than Sophia. "I'm sorry," he whispered, shame burning through him as he moved away. "This isn't about you." Lauren was kind in her disappointment. "Let me guess, ex-wife." James nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Some wounds take longer to heal," she said simply. "Don't beat yourself up about it." After she left, James stood on the balcony until dawn, finally accepting the truth his heart and body had been telling him for a year. He remained completely hopelessly in love with Sophia Bennett, regardless of whether she ever forgave him or allowed him back into her life. The realization brought no peace, only the certainty that his punishment to love someone he'd hurt beyond repair was both fitting and seemingly eternal. Chapter 4. First Rejection. As his daughter's second birthday approached, James could no longer bear his self-imposed exile from her life. For 2 years he'd watched from a distance, collected scraps of information through mutual connections, and anonymously funded a trust for her future. It wasn't enough. Though terrified of rejection, he needed to at least try to be part of her life, their lives in some meaningful way. The decision hadn't come easily. His therapist had cautioned against rushing the process, suggesting that any approach to Sophia needed to prioritize her comfort and boundaries, rather than his desire for absolution. "This isn't about easing your guilt," James Dr. Sullivan had explained during their session. "It's about what's best for your daughter and her mother. Are you prepared to accept whatever limits Sophia sets, even if they're more restrictive than you'd hope?" He'd spent weeks considering this question, examining his motivations with brutal honesty. Was he seeking contact to ease his own pain, or did he genuinely believe his presence could benefit Lily? The answer wasn't simple, but he'd finally concluded that regardless of his personal desires, a child deserved to know her. Father provided he could prove himself worthy of that role. For weeks he crafted and discarded approaches, seeking the perfect words to express his remorse. Draft after draft of letters filled his wastebasket, each attempt seeming either too defensive or pathetically inadequate to address the magnitude of his betrayal. Email felt too impersonal, a phone call too easily ignored. Eventually he settled on something concrete, an envelope containing certified checks covering 2 years of substantial child support payments he had calculated, but never been asked to provide, along with a brief note requesting just 5 minutes of Sophia's time. The financial gesture wasn't meant as compensation. No amount could ever balance his absence, but as tangible evidence of his commitment to responsibility, something that couldn't be conveyed through apologies alone. He'd spent hours researching appropriate child support amounts, factoring in his considerable income, educational expenses, health care, and additional costs associated with raising a child in the city. The final figure was substantial, far exceeding court-mandated minimums, reflecting his desire to provide not just basic needs, but opportunities and security. On a brisk spring morning, James stationed himself outside Sophia's apartment building, where she had moved with their daughter after leaving her parents' home. His investigator had confirmed their routine. They typically left for the park around 10 on Saturdays. Heart pounding painfully against his ribs, he waited, rehearsing the careful apology he'd practiced for days. The neighborhood was modest but pleasant, tree-lined streets with well-maintained brownstones, children's chalk drawings, decorating the sidewalks, a far cry from the luxury high-rise, where he'd moved after selling their shared home. He wondered if Sophia had chosen this area for its family-friendly atmosphere, or its distance from their former social circles. Either way, it seemed to suit the new life she'd built without him. Each passing minute intensified his anxiety until he found himself contemplating retreat. What right did he have to disrupt their lives? But before he could act on this impulse, the building door opened, revealing Sophia holding their daughter's hand, and James's carefully prepared words evaporated. His daughter, seeing her up close, stole his breath away. In the glimpses he'd caught from a distance, he hadn't appreciated the delicate perfection of her features, the intelligent alertness in her eyes. She was beautiful, with Sophia's delicate features, warm brown skin and curly hair gathered into tiny puffs, secured with colorful bands. His eyes, so clearly reflected in her small face, regarded the world with curious wonder. Sophia spotted him immediately, her body tensing as she instinctively pulled their daughter closer. Her free hand moved slightly forward, a subtle protective gesture that spoke volumes about her maternal instincts. The little girl looked up at her mother, sensing the change in her demeanor. James noticed how attuned his daughter was to Sophia's emotions, a connection forged through years of being each other's primary relationship. He remained frozen, suddenly aware of how he must appear to them, a stranger disrupting their peaceful morning routine. Though he'd maintained his appearance meticulously as always, he felt disheveled under Sophia's scrutiny, as if she could see through his carefully pressed suit to the turmoil beneath. Sophia, James managed his voice thick with emotion. He took a tentative step forward, stopping when he saw her expression harden. The defensiveness in her posture was justified. He knew he had proven himself a threat to her happiness once before. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, controlled, revealing nothing of the warm, melodic tones he remembered. The contrast between her current tone and the voice he'd fallen in love with years ago, the rich, expressive instrument that had captivated him when he first heard her sing at a charity event, struck him like a physical blow. He had done this, transformed her warmth to ice where he was concerned. The knowledge deepened his already profound regret. "I just want to talk, please." He gestured to a nearby bench, careful to maintain enough distance that she wouldn't feel cornered. 5 minutes. Sophia glanced down at their daughter, clearly calculating the risk of this encounter. Her expression softened momentarily when she looked at the child, transforming her face back to something closer to the woman he remembered. "Lily, stay right beside Mommy." "Okay, Lily." His daughter's name was Lily. The musical reference wasn't lost on James. Sophia had chosen a name connecting their child to her passion for music. A name both beautiful and meaningful. Sophia led Lily to the bench, keeping herself between the child and James as they sat. The little girl regarded him with innocent curiosity, unaware of his significance to her existence. 5 minutes, Sophia said, checking her watch pointedly. James cleared his throat, willing himself to focus, despite the overwhelming emotion of being so close to them. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you." He began extending the envelope. "But this belongs to you and Lily. It's support I should have been providing all along." Sophia made no move to take it. "We don't need your money. It's not about need. It's about responsibility. Responsibility." A flash of anger broke through her composed exterior. "That's rich coming from you." James pushed on, desperate to say what he'd rehearsed before she dismissed him entirely. "Sophia, I know I don't deserve your time, but I need to tell you how sorry I am. Those horrible things I said, they weren't true. I was a coward, and sorry doesn't undo what you did." Sophia cut him off, her voice, low but intense. "Sorry doesn't erase those words from my memory, or the months I spent believing them, wondering if there was something fundamentally unlovable about me that made you treat me that way." Her raw honesty hit him like a physical blow. Before he could respond, Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve, clearly bored with the adult conversation. "Park Mommy swings." Sophia smoothed her daughter's hair tenderly. "In a minute, baby." Gathering his courage, James addressed the real reason for his visit. "I'd like to be part of Lily's life. I know I have no legal right after signing away custody. But you said you never wanted her." Sophia's voice turned razor sharp. Those exact words. "You don't get to change your mind now that the hard part's done, now that she's walking and talking and becoming a person. I did that. I was there for the colic and the teething and the fevers, while you were where exactly, living your life as if we didn't exist." James flinched, each word a deserved indictment. "I was wrong, so wrong. I've regretted those words every day since they left my mouth." "Regret doesn't raise a child." Sophia stood, lifting Lily into her arms. "Your 5 minutes are up." In a desperate move, James placed the envelope on the bench. "Please at least take this. It's Lily's by right." Sophia looked at the envelope, then back at him, her beautiful face a mask of contained fury and hurt. "We don't want anything from you." With a swift movement, she knocked the envelope to the ground, papers spilling across the sidewalk. "Stay away from us, James." As she walked away, Lily peered over her mother's shoulder, giving James a small wave that shattered what remained of his heart. He knelt to gather the scattered checks, each one representing months of financial support that could never compensate for his absence from his daughter's life. That evening, James sat in his parked car near the local playground, watching from a distance as Sophia pushed Lily on the swings. His earlier rejection had left him hollow, yet he couldn't stay away, drawn by some primal need to at least witness his daughter's childhood, even if he couldn't participate in it. Through his camera's zoom lens, he captured a single photo of Lily, laughing on the swing, her joyful expression, a painful reminder of all he was missing. This image, the first clear picture he had of his daughter, would be carried in his wallet everywhere, a constant reminder of what his cruelty had cost him. The following day, James received a cease and desist letter from Sophia's attorney formally warning him against approaching her or Lily without legal permission. The document cited his abandonment during pregnancy and voluntary termination of parental rights as grounds for prohibiting contact. Reading between the carefully worded legal phrases, James recognized Sophia's message. His presence was not just unwanted, but considered a threat to the stable life she'd built for their daughter. Rather than fight the order, James respected her boundary, redirecting his efforts toward becoming someone worthy of eventually being in their lives. He enrolled in therapy, confronting the entitled attitudes and insecurities that had poisoned his marriage. He channeled his regret into intensive volunteer work with children's charities, particularly those supporting single mothers, and still, every few weeks he found himself drawn to places where he might catch distant glimpses of Lily, growing outside her preschool at the community center, where Sophia taught music classes in the park, where they often play. He never approached, never made his presence known, accepting this phantom existence as his penance. On Lily's third birthday, he left a beautifully wrapped gift outside Sophia's apartment door. A child-sized piano with a card signed simply, "From your father." The next day, he found the unopened package returned to his doorstep with "Return to sender" scrawled across the wrapping. The message couldn't have been clearer. He remained unwelcome in his daughter's life, his attempts at connection rejected. That night, standing in the nursery he'd never dismantled, James faced the crushing reality that his single moment of cruelty had potentially cost him a lifetime with his daughter. The yellow walls that had once represented hope now seemed to mock him, a shrine to what might have been, had he not destroyed it with his own words. Yet despite the rejection, despite the legal warnings, despite every sign that Sophia would never forgive him, James made a silent promise to his absent child. He would keep trying, not in ways that disrupted the stable life Sophia had created, but in becoming the kind of man who might someday deserve a second chance. Whether that chance ever came or not, he owed it to Lily to become someone better than the man who had spoken those unforgivable words to her mother 2 years ago. With that resolution firm in his mind, James finally began dismantling the nursery, donating the unused baby items to a shelter for single mothers, not as an acceptance of defeat, but as recognition that if he ever had a place in Lily's life, it wouldn't be through clinging to a past that never happened, but by proving through consistent actions that people, even deeply flawed ones, could change. Chapter 5. Failed Connections. 6 months after Sophia's first rejection, James found himself caught in a purgatory of his own, making legally barred from approaching his ex-wife and daughter, yet unable to move forward with his life. His therapist had suggested dating might help him heal, insisting that meaningful connection with someone new could potentially ease his fixation on the family he'd lost. "You need to create new memories, James," Dr. Thompson had explained during their weekly session. "Your obsession with Sophia and Lily isn't healthy for anyone, especially when Sophia has made her boundaries clear." Though unconvinced, James allowed his college friend Nathan to arrange an introduction to Rachel Morgan, a divorced pediatric surgeon with, as Nathan put it, no interest in drama, but a great appreciation for second chances. Their first date at a quiet restaurant had gone surprisingly well, Rachel's intelligent conversation and warm laugh providing James his first genuine enjoyment in years. By their third date, James found himself genuinely drawn to Rachel. Unlike the meaningless connections he'd attempted immediately after the divorce, this relationship held real potential. She understood the complexities of failed marriages, the weight of regret, and the challenging path of redemption. When she invited him to her elegant brownstone after dinner, James accepted with only slight hesitation. In her living room, Rachel poured them both a glass of wine, her hands steady and confident. Surgeons' hands, he thought, that save children's lives daily. As they talked on her plush sofa, the conversation flowed naturally toward more intimate territory. When she leaned in to kiss him, James responded, surprising himself with the genuine desire he felt. "We can take this slowly," Rachel murmured against his lips, her eyes searching his. "I'd like that," James replied, following her as she led him toward her bedroom. Inside the room, bathed in soft lamplight, Rachel began unbuttoning his shirt, her touch gentle but assured. James tried to stay present, to focus on the beautiful, kind woman before him, rather than the ghosts that haunted him. As her fingers traced his chest, he closed his eyes, willing himself to feel only this moment. Yet the moment her hands moved to his belt, Sophia's face appeared behind his eyelids. Not in anger or pain, but as she'd looked on their wedding day, her eyes filled with trust he'd so thoroughly betrayed. His body responded immediately, tension replacing desire, an invisible wall descending between him and Rachel. She noticed immediately, surgeon's intuition attuned to subtle changes. "James, is everything okay? I'm sorry," he whispered. stepping back and refastening his shirt buttons with trembling fingers. "It's not you. It's you're not ready." Rachel finished for him, disappointment, evident in her voice but tempered with compassion. "I've been there." Humiliation burned through him. "I thought I was. I want to be." "The heart heals on its own schedule," she said, adjusting her clothing with dignity. "And sometimes when we've truly loved someone, a part of us never fully lets go." Her understanding only increased James's shame. "I should leave. You could," Rachel acknowledged, "or we could finish our wine and talk friends rather than lovers, at least for now." Though grateful for her generosity, James knew continuing the evening would only prolong his embarrassment. After awkward goodbyes and promises to call that both knew were unlikely to be kept, he drove home through rain-slick streets, self-loathing his only companion. The next morning, James received a call from Ethan Peterson, his former college roommate, and now a mechanic who ran the garage James had used since college. Though they had drifted apart after his divorce, Ethan remained one of the few people who never judged James's mistakes. "Your ex came in yesterday," Ethan said without preamble. "That old Honda of hers needs more work than it's worth." James's grip tightened on the phone. "Sophia brought her car to you. She didn't know I still owned the place. Nearly walked out when she recognized my name, but she was already late for work, and the car was making some nasty noises." "What's wrong with it?" James asked, already calculating costs in his head. "Everything. Transmission's shot, brake lines are corroded, and the engine's burning oil. Told her to junk it, but she said she needs it to get to work and take the kid to preschool." James closed his eyes, picturing Sophia and Lily stranded on some darkened roadside. "Can you fix it?" "Sure, but it'll cost more than the car's worth." She nearly cried when I gave her the estimate, then asked about payment plans. Ethan paused. "Look, I wouldn't normally get involved, but she's got a kid, man. Dangerous driving, that thing." "Fix it," James said without hesitation. "Whatever it needs. Tell her it's covered under a manufacturer's recall or something." "You sure about this?" "She seemed pretty determined not to take anything from you." "She won't know it's from me. Just make sure they're safe, Ethan." After hanging up, James sat at his desk staring at the calendar where he'd secretly marked Lily's preschool events, the fall festival next week, the winter pageant in December. Though he never attended, knowing when they occurred gave him some tenuous connection to his daughter's life. 3 weeks later, while reviewing his company's quarterly reports, James received a text message that sent his heart racing. "Stop interfering in our lives. Your guilt payments don't erase what you did. Sophia." She had discovered his involvement with the car repairs. James stared at the message, reading and rereading the first direct communication he'd received from her in over 2 years. Despite its anger, despite its rejection, he treasured these words from her. Taking a deep breath, he typed, "Can we meet just for coffee, please?" The response came faster than he expected. 5:00 p.m. Parkside Cafe, 15 minutes max. The Parkside Cafe sat equidistant between his office and Lily's preschool neutral territory. James arrived 20 minutes early, securing a quiet corner table and ordering Sophia's favorite tea from memory, hoping the gesture might soften her approach. When she walked in, James's breath caught, though he occasionally glimpsed her from a distance. Seeing her up close after so long hit him with physical force. She wore her hair differently, now the long curls he'd loved replaced with a shorter, more practical style that still framed her face beautifully. Her eyes, once so warm when they looked at him now, held nothing but guarded weariness. "Thank you for coming," he said, as she sat ignoring the tea he'd ordered. "I'm only here to make something clear," Sophia replied, her voice controlled. "I don't want your money. I don't want your gifts. I don't want your mechanic friends lying to me about recalls that magically cover thousands in repairs." James nodded, accepting her anger. "I just wanted to help. The thought of you and Lily in an unsafe car," "Don't say her name." Sophia's composure slipped for a moment. "You don't get to pretend concern for a child you rejected before she was even born." "I'm not pretending," James said quietly. "I know words can't undo my actions, but I truly am sorry for everything, not just that night, but for failing you both every day since." Sophia's fingers tightened around her purse. "Your apologies mean nothing to me. They change nothing." "I don't expect them to," James admitted. "But I needed to say it anyway." For a brief moment, something flickered in Sophia's eyes. Not forgiveness, but perhaps recognition of his sincerity. Then it vanished, her walls firmly back in place. "Stay away from us, James," she said, standing abruptly. "Next time you interfere, I'll file for a restraining order." As she walked toward the door, James noticed the slight tremble in her hands, the only sign that his presence still affected her at all. He remained seated long after she'd gone, the untouched tea growing cold, clinging to that small tremor as evidence that beneath her anger, Sophia Bennett still felt something for the man who had once been her husband. That evening, James received a call from Rachel offering friendship if romance wasn't possible. Though touched by her kindness, he declined, knowing he couldn't offer even friendship when his heart remained so thoroughly tethered to a woman who wanted nothing to do with him. His inability to connect with Rachel or anyone confirmed what he'd suspected for years now. His heart and body remained stubbornly, hopelessly loyal to Sophia, regardless of whether she ever forgave him. Chapter 6. Distant Observer. As another year passed, James settled into a pattern of watching his daughter grow from a safe distance. Though painful, these glimpses of Lily's life became essential to him, markers against which he measured the passing of time. He knew her favorite purple coat, the slightly lopsided way her hair was gathered into puffs on school mornings, and the skip in her step when she was particularly excited. Today marked Lily's 4th birthday, and James had spent weeks selecting the perfect gift, a child-sized violin, after overhearing a teacher mention Lily's fascination with the instrument during one of his discreet visits to observe her preschool's outdoor playtime. He'd had it custom-made, the finest craftsmanship available, with her name delicately inlaid in mother-of-pearl along the neck. Rather than risk another direct rejection, James arranged delivery through a specialty music shop, ensuring no connection could be traced back to him. The accompanying card said simply, "For Lily, who carries music in her name, happy 4th birthday." That evening, James drove to Sophia's apartment building, parking across the street as he had countless times before. From his vantage point, he could see lights in their 3rd-floor window, imagining the birthday celebration taking place inside Sophia's homemade chocolate cake, her specialty once upon a time. Perhaps Sophia's brother Daniel making Lily laugh with his silly voices. The violin possibly being discovered among her presents. These imagined scenes were the closest he allowed himself to family life. These stolen moments of observation, his only participation in his daughter's childhood. James had respected Sophia's demand to stay away, never approaching them directly after their coffee shop confrontation, channeling his need for connection into distant vigilance instead. The building's security door opened, and James instinctively slumped lower in his seat. To his surprise, Sophia emerged alone, carrying what appeared to be a gift box, the violin he'd sent, still wrapped in its distinctive paper from the music shop. Her expression was not one of anger but of weary resignation, her shoulders carrying the invisible weight of single parenthood and his persistent, unwanted attention. With determined strides, she walked directly toward his car, as if some sixth sense had led her to his hiding place. James considered driving away but found himself frozen, caught in a trap of his own making. When Sophia reached his window, he lowered it reluctantly, preparing for justified anger. Instead, she simply placed the unopened gift on his passenger seat. "Stop," she said, the single word carrying exhausted finality rather than rage. Before he could respond, she turned and walked back toward the building, her posture rigid with suppressed emotion. Only then did James notice the for sale sign posted near the building's entrance. She was moving, taking Lily somewhere he wouldn't find them so easily. The realization hit him with physical force. His constant hovering, his anonymous gifts, his distant observation, what he justified as love and concern, must have felt like stalking to Sophia, a persistent intrusion into the life she was trying to build without him. The following morning, James found himself parked outside Lily's preschool at drop-off time, knowing this might be his last opportunity to see his daughter before they disappeared to some new location. He watched from across the street as Sophia walked Lily to the entrance, kneeling to straighten her little backpack before kissing her goodbye. As other parents filed in and out, a teacher approached his car, her expression concerned. "Excuse me, Sia. Can I help you with something?" James realized how suspicious he must look, an unknown man watching a preschool. "I'm sorry, I was just..." He fumbled for an explanation that wouldn't sound alarming. "Are you Lily Bennett's father?" the teacher asked unexpectedly. Startled by the direct question, James could only nod. "Miss Bennett mentioned you might be observing." Her diplomatic phrasing couldn't disguise the underlying concern. "I should let you know that we're required to report any unauthorized persons near school property." The implied threat was clear. His presence was not just unwelcome but potentially reportable to authorities. "I understand," James said, starting his engine. "I'm leaving now." Before he could drive away, the teacher's expression softened slightly. "They're doing a parent showcase next Friday. The children are performing songs at 2:00. It's open to all family members." She hesitated. Perhaps that would be a more appropriate way to see your daughter. The unexpected kindness in her suggestion brought a lump to James's throat. "Thank you," he managed, though he knew attending would violate Sophia's boundaries. That evening, James received an unexpected text from Sophia teacher, said you were watching the school again. "This needs to stop." Heart pounding. James typed his response carefully. "I'm sorry. I know it's wrong. I just want to know she's okay." Minutes passed before Sophia's reply appeared. "Parent showcase. Next Friday, 2:00 p.m. You can attend if you sit in the back and leave immediately after. No contact with Lily, no gifts, no approaching us. James stared at the message in disbelief. After years of rejection, this small concession felt monumental. "Thank you," he responded simply. "I'll respect your conditions completely." The week until the showcase passed with excruciating slowness. James purchased a new suit, had his hair trimmed, rehearsed how he would behave, where to sit, how to leave, without drawing attention, how to control his emotions at seeing his daughter perform. When Friday finally arrived, James entered the preschool auditorium with a pounding heart, selecting a seat in the back corner. As instructed, parents filled the rows ahead, chatting and laughing, smartphones ready to capture precious moments. The easy camaraderie of these families, this normal everyday ritual of parenthood, highlighted all he had lost through his own actions. The children filed onto the risers at the front, each class identified by differently colored t-shirts. James spotted Lily immediately. Purple shirt hair, adorned with matching ribbons, tiny face serious with concentration. She was taller than he expected, her movements more coordinated than the last time he'd glimpsed her playing. Even from a distance he could see her scanning the audience, presumably looking for Sophia, his daughter, his blood, a little person he'd helped create, but had no hand in shaping. The weight of all he'd missed, first words, first steps first, everything crashed over him anew. The children began singing simple melodies accompanied by enthusiastic hand motions. When Lily's class performed "You Are My Sunshine," James had to grip his seat to remain in place, tears threatening. Despite his determination to maintain composure, he hadn't known his daughter could sing, hadn't known she'd inherited Sophia's perfect pitch and natural musicality. As the program concluded, parents surged forward to collect their children's cameras, flashing voices, calling out praise. James remained seated as promised, watching from afar as Sophia embraced Lily, lifting her into a hug that spoke of unconditional love. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Lily's gaze drifted toward the back of the room, her eyes so like his own, seeming to find him in the shadows. Then Sophia turned, taking Lily's hand, and they were gone, swallowed by the crowd of celebrating families. James waited until the auditorium had nearly emptied before slipping out, honoring his agreement to avoid contact. In his car, emotion finally overtook him. He wept without shame, grieving all that his cruelty had cost him, all the moments of his daughter's life he would never recover. Yet beneath the grief lay a fragile seed of hope. Sophia had allowed this small connection, this tiny window into their world. Perhaps someday there might be room for more. 3 days later, James received another text from Sophia. "We are moving next weekend. New job, new school district." The message contained no address, no invitation to know where they were going. Its purpose was clear: to inform him that his distant observations would no longer be possible. His heart sank, but he forced himself to respond respectfully. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know. Wishing you both the best in your new home." Sophia's final text arrived moments later. She asked about you after the showcase. "I told her you were her father, but that you live separately from us. That's all she needs to know for now." For now, 2 small words that carried enormous significance, not forever or always, but for now, suggesting the possibility, however, remote, that someday the situation might change. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even acceptance, but it was the first acknowledgement that James existed in Lily's consciousness as something other than a complete absence. That night, James finally dismantled the nursery he'd preserved for 4 years, donating the unused baby items to a women's shelter. As he carefully removed the yellow paint from the walls, he made a decision. No more watching from shadows, no more anonymous gifts, no more pretending he could be part of their lives from a distance. If he truly loved them, he would respect Sophia's boundaries, completely focusing instead on becoming the kind of man who might someday deserve a second chance at fatherhood, should such an opportunity ever arise. The following weekend, as Sophia and Lily were likely settling into their new home somewhere beyond his reach, James began volunteering at a center for children, with incarcerated parents, channeling his longing for connection into helping other fathers separated from their children through circumstances both within and beyond their control. If he couldn't be a father to his own daughter yet, he could at least use his pain to help others navigate similar waters, finding purpose in the very separation that had once threatened to destroy him. Chapter 7. Unexpected opening. 2 years had passed since Sophia and Lily moved away, 2 years during which James had honored his promise to respect their boundaries. He'd redirected his energy into building a better version of himself, continuing therapy, expanding his volunteer work with children's programs, and restructuring his business to support community development projects. Though he still carried Lily's photograph in his wallet, he'd stopped searching for glimpses of her and Sophia, accepting that his role in their lives, if it ever existed again, would be on Sophia's terms, not his. On a rain-soaked Tuesday evening, James was working late in his office when his cell phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He answered automatically, expecting a business call. "James, it's Daniel." The voice of Sophia's brother, whom he hadn't spoken to since before the divorce, sent James's pulse racing. Daniel had been fiercely protective of his sister. After the separation, his cold fury at James's betrayal, second only to Sophia's father's. Hearing his voice now without immediate hostility was so unexpected that James found himself momentarily speechless. "There's been an accident." The world tilted sharply as worst-case scenarios flashed through James's mind, his throat constricting with sudden terror. "Sophia, Lily, they're okay," Daniel clarified quickly. "It's me. I'm in Metropolitan Hospital. Collapsed lung, some internal bleeding. They're keeping me for observation." James exhaled sharply, relief washing through him. "I'm sorry to hear that, but why Sophia's with me?" Daniel interrupted. "She needs someone to watch Lily. Our parents are in Europe, and her regular sitter isn't answering. She's desperate, man." The implication struck James like a physical blow. After 6 years of rejection, Sophia was actually considering leaving their daughter in his care. "She wants me to watch Lily?" he asked, unable to keep the disbelief from his voice. "Not want exactly," Daniel admitted, "but she's out of options. And I mentioned you live 20 minutes from the hospital now." There was muffled conversation in the background before Daniel returned. "She said to tell you, this doesn't change anything. It's just an emergency situation. Tell her I'll be there in 15 minutes. James replied, already grabbing his keys. The drive to Metropolitan Hospital passed in a blur of anxious anticipation. After years of distant observation and painful separation, he would finally meet his daughter properly. The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. When James entered the hospital waiting room, he spotted them immediately. Sophia sat on a vinyl chair, Lily leaning against her small head, drooping with exhaustion. His daughter had grown so much, no longer the toddler he remembered, but a school-aged child with gangly limbs and her mother's delicate features. Sophia looked up, her expression guarded as he approached. 6 years had only enhanced her beauty, though new lines of worry framed her eyes, and silver threads now appeared at her temples. Without makeup, dressed in casual clothes likely grabbed in haste, she was still the most breathtaking woman he'd ever seen. "Thank you for coming," she said formally, as if addressing a distant acquaintance rather than the man she'd once vowed to love forever. James nodded, maintaining a respectful distance. "How's Daniel? Stable? They're running more tests." She turned to the drowsy child beside her. "Lily, remember I told you about your father? This is him, James." Lily straightened, studying him with curious eyes so like his own. "You're my dad." The simple question, spoken in a clear, confident voice, nearly undid him. "Yes," he managed, kneeling to her level. "I'm very happy to meet you. Mommy says you live far away. That's why you never visit." James glanced at Sophia, understanding this was the explanation she'd given their daughter. "That's right," he agreed, following her lead. "But I'm here now." Sophia stood, gathering her purse. "Lily needs dinner and proper sleep. I've written everything down." She handed him a neatly folded paper. My address, her bedtime routine, food allergies, emergency contacts. Her voice remained businesslike, betraying no emotion. "I should be back by midnight. Take as long as Daniel needs." James assured her. "We'll be fine." "Lily," Sophia said, kneeling to hug their daughter tightly. "Be good for your father. I'll see you soon." "Will Uncle Daniel be okay?" Lily asked, bottom lip trembling slightly. "He's going to be just fine," Sophia promised. "Mommy just needs to stay with him tonight." After one last embrace, Sophia straightened, addressing James with quiet intensity. "Thank you for doing this, but please understand this doesn't change our arrangement." "I understand," James replied sincerely. "I'm just glad I can help." The drive to Sophia's new home was filled with Lily's surprisingly articulate conversation, her initial shyness giving way to natural curiosity. "Do you like pizza? What's your favorite color? Do you know how to play checkers?" James answered each question, carefully treasuring this unexpected glimpse into his daughter's personality. She was bright, observant, and startlingly direct, a perfect blend of Sophia's warmth and his analytical nature. Sophia's home proved to be a modest but charming townhouse in a family-friendly neighborhood. Inside, photographs lined the walls, Lily at various ages, Sophia with her parents and brother, but no sign of James anywhere. It was as if his existence had been carefully excised from the family narrative. Following Sophia's detailed instructions, James prepared the simple pasta dinner she'd planned, marveling at how easily Lily accepted his presence. As they ate, she chatted about school friends and her music lessons, offering James a precious window into the life he'd missed. "Mommy says, I got my voice from her and my eyes from you," Lily announced between bites. "What else did I get from you?" James considered the question carefully. "Maybe your curiosity. I've always asked a lot of questions too." This seemed to satisfy her. After dinner, James followed the bedtime routine. Sophia had meticulously documented bath teeth brushing one chapter from her current book. As he tucked Lily into bed, she regarded him solemnly. "Are you going to visit more now?" The innocent question pierced James's heart. "I'd like that he answered truthfully, but that's something for your mom and me to figure out." Lily nodded, accepting this adult complexity with surprising grace. "I'm glad you came today." "I am too," James whispered, emotion tightening his throat. "Good night, Lily." After his daughter fell asleep, James wandered the living room, studying photographs that documented the years he'd missed Lily's first day of kindergarten dance recital birthday parties. On the mantel sat a framed certificate declaring Sophia Bennett Teacher of the Year at Hamilton Elementary School, evidence of the career she'd built while raising their daughter alone. Near midnight, headlights swept across the living room as Sophia's car pulled into the driveway. James met her at the door, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Lily. "How's Daniel better?" "They're keeping him overnight for observation." Sophia looked exhausted, dark circles shadowing her eyes. "How was Lily?" "Perfect," James said truthfully. "She's an amazing child, Sophia." Something in his tone must have revealed the depth of his emotion, because Sophia's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. She sank onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. For a terrifying moment, James thought she might be crying, but when she looked up, her expression was composed if weary. "I never planned for this to happen," she said quietly. "Having you in her life again, even temporarily." James sat across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I understand this doesn't change anything, but thank you for trusting me with her tonight." Sophia studied him, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time since their divorce. "You're different," she observed finally. "I've tried to be," James acknowledged. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, years of hurt and regret, filling the space like a physical presence. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice barely audible. "She asked about you more and more as she gets older. I've never known what to say." James absorbed this revelation, carefully recognizing the implicit question, "What would you like me to be to her, Sophia?" She shook her head, fatigue evident in every line of her body. "I don't know. I've spent 6 years protecting her from being hurt by you." "I would never hurt her," James said with quiet conviction. "But I understand why you wouldn't believe that." Sophia's eyes met his, searching for something, sincerity perhaps, or evidence of the change she'd noted. Whatever she saw must have satisfied some question, because she nodded slightly. "Daniel will need help during his recovery. I'll have to take some time off work, but I can't miss too many days." She left the implication hanging. "I could help," James offered cautiously, "with Lily. I mean, after school or whenever you need." He held his breath, waiting for the rejection he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, Sophia surprised him. "I'll think about it," she said, rising from the sofa in clear dismissal. "Thank you again for tonight." As James drove home, emotions warred within him: elation at having spent precious hours with Lily, hope at Sophia's tentative opening, and anxiety about what came next. For the first time in 6 years, he allowed himself to imagine being part of his daughter's life, in some meaningful way, however limited. The possibility, however, fragile, felt like dawn breaking after an endless night. Chapter 8. Careful Street Eps. Over the following weeks, a fragile new pattern emerged. As Daniel recovered from his injuries, James received occasional texts from Sophia requesting his help with Lily, picking her up from school when Sophia needed to work late, watching her during weekend hospital visits. Each interaction was carefully structured with clear boundaries and explicit end times, but they represented more connection with his daughter than James had experienced in the previous 6 years combined. James approached these opportunities with methodical care, determined to prove himself trustworthy. He arrived early for every pickup, followed Sophia's instructions to the letter, and never overstepped by suggesting additional time or activities beyond what she requested. Each moment with Lily felt like a gift he'd done nothing to deserve but was desperate to honor. To his surprise, Lily accepted his presence in her life with the resilient adaptability of childhood. Her initial curiosity evolved into comfortable familiarity as they established their own small rituals, stopping for ice cream after school pickups, playing elaborate checkers tournaments, where she gleefully declared herself the undefeated champion, reading chapters from her favorite mystery series. One Thursday evening, after James had picked Lily up from her dance class, they arrived at Sophia's house to find it dark and empty. "Mom must still be at the hospital," Lily observed, using her own key to let them in. James checked his phone, finding a missed text from Sophia: running late. Daniel had complication. Leftovers in fridge for Lily. Should be home by 8. After getting Lily settled with dinner and homework, James noticed the exhaustion evident in her usually energetic demeanor. "Tough day at school?" he asked, sitting beside her at the kitchen table. Lily nodded, pushing homework aside with uncharacteristic frustration. "We had presentations today." "You missed me now." "Everyone makes mistakes," James assured her. I'm sure it wasn't as bad as you think. Mom's been so tired. Lily continued, revealing the true source of her distress. She thinks I don't notice, but she falls asleep on the couch almost every night, and she's not singing anymore. James felt a pang at this insight into their daily life. Sophia not singing was indeed concerning. Music had always been as essential to her as breathing. Your mom has a lot on her plate right now with your Uncle Daniel being sick. It's not just that Lily insisted with surprising perception. She was tired before that too. She works all the time. The implication was clear. Sophia was exhausted from single-handedly maintaining their life a burden. James had forced her to carry through his actions years ago. The knowledge settled like a weight on his chest. Why don't you get ready for bed, he suggested gently. I'll help you with homework in the morning if your mom says it's okay. After Lily was bathed and pajama-clad, James tucked her into bed reading the agreed-upon single chapter from her book. As he prepared to leave her room, Lily's small voice stopped him. Dad, could you stay until I fall asleep, Dad? She'd never called him that before. Always carefully using James as Sophia had presumably instructed, the simple word nearly undid him. Of course he managed sitting beside her bed in the dimly lit room. Within minutes, Lily's breathing deepened into sleep. James remained watching her, memorizing the peaceful features of his daughter's face, storing this moment among his most precious memories. He was so absorbed that he didn't hear Sophia enter until she spoke from the doorway. You got her to sleep already? James rose carefully to avoid waking Lily. She was pretty tired. Said she had a rough day at school. They moved to the living room where James noted the dark circles under Sophia's eyes, the slight droop in her usually perfect posture. Lily's observations had been accurate. Sophia was exhausted to the bone. How's Daniel? He asked as she collapsed onto the sofa. Better now. False alarm. She rubbed her temples where a tension headache clearly threatened. Thank you for staying late. I should have called. It's no problem, James assured her. I'm happy to help anytime. Sophia's gaze sharpened slightly despite her fatigue. Why are you doing this, James, really? The question surprised him with its directness. Because she's my daughter, he answered honestly. And because you needed help. For 6 years you sent gifts and watched from a distance. Why the change now? James considered his response carefully. I realized I was trying to ease my own guilt, rather than actually helping either of you. Watching from afar was selfish. It gave me some connection without respecting what you needed. Something in his answer seemed to satisfy her because Sophia nodded slightly before closing her eyes, head resting against the sofa cushions. The vulnerability of the gesture, so unlike her usual guarded demeanor around him, tugged at James's heart. When was the last time you had a night off? He asked quietly. Night off from what? Being a mother, teacher, caretaker for my brother. Sophia's laugh held no humor. There are no nights off, James. That's not how this works. An idea formed in James's mind, risky but potentially worth the rejection it might trigger. What if there could be just for one night? Sophia opened her eyes, weariness returning. What are you suggesting? Let me take Lily for the whole weekend, James proposed. You could visit Daniel without worrying about childcare. Maybe even have some time for yourself. He expected an immediate refusal, but was surprised when Sophia appeared to actually consider the offer. She has dance class Saturday morning, she said finally, and she needs to finish her science project by Sunday. I can handle both. James assured her, hardly daring to believe she might agree. Sophia studied him, conflict evident in her expression. She'd stay at your place, James nodded. I have a guest room that could be hers. We could get her things tomorrow after school. The silence stretched between them as Sophia weighed trust against caution, past hurt against present need. Finally she sighed. Okay, but I want check-in calls morning and night, and if she wants to come home at any point, you bring her immediately. Absolutely, James agreed quickly before she could reconsider. When he left Sophia's house that night, James felt a cautious hope he hadn't experienced in years. The weekend ahead represented more than just extended time with Lily. It signified Sophia's first willingness to truly trust him since their marriage imploded. The following day, James left work early to prepare his apartment for Lily's visit. The guest room, previously an unused space filled with storage boxes, was transformed with new linens in bright colors, a reading lamp beside the bed, and a small desk for homework. He stocked the refrigerator with foods Lily had mentioned liking, rented several family movies, and even purchased the specific brand of bubble bath Sophia always used for her. When he arrived to pick up Lily after school, James was surprised to find Sophia home early, an overnight bag already packed for their daughter. I wrote down her schedule, Sophia explained, handing him a detailed itinerary. Dance class is at 10 tomorrow. Her instructor's number is there if you have questions about her costume. Her science project materials are in the blue folder. She knows what needs to be done. but might need help with the presentation board. We'll manage, James assured her, touched by her thoroughness. When Lily emerged from her room, clearly excited about the weekend ahead, Sophia knelt to hug her tightly. Be good for your father, she instructed, her voice steady despite the anxiety James could sense beneath her composed exterior. Call me tomorrow morning. Okay, Mom, Lily agreed easily. You should take a bubble bath while I'm gone. You always say they make everything better. Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily lightened the shadows under her eyes. That's a wonderful idea. She rose, addressing James with quiet intensity. Remember our agreement. I'll honor it completely, he promised. The weekend progressed better than James could have hoped. Lily's delight at having her own space in his apartment, her enthusiasm for making pizza together on Friday night, her concentration during her Saturday dance class, each moment felt miraculous to James, who had once resigned himself to never experiencing such ordinary pleasures of fatherhood. On Sunday afternoon, as they put finishing touches on her science project, James's phone rang with Sophia's number. Everything okay, he answered, immediate concern in his voice. Fine, Sophia assured him. She hesitated. The house is so quiet. I thought I'd see if you wanted to bring Lily home for dinner. I could cook for all of us. James nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Sophia was inviting him to dinner, a meal together, the three of them like a normal family. We'd love that, he managed, glancing at Lily, who looked up with interest from her project. What time? 6. Nothing fancy, just pasta. When they arrived at Sophia's house that evening, James was struck by subtle differences. Fresh flowers on the table, the delicious aroma of proper cooking rather than quick weeknight meals, and most surprisingly, Sophia herself looking rested for the first time in weeks, wearing a casual dress instead of her usual practical work clothes. Dinner passed with surprising ease, Lily dominating conversation with stories about their weekend adventures. James contributed occasional details, careful not to overstate his role or suggest any presumptions about future arrangements. Sophia remained quiet but attentive, her expression thoughtful as she observed the comfortable dynamic between father and daughter. After Lily went to prepare for bed, James helped Sophia clear the table, falling into a rhythm that felt hauntingly familiar from their married days. Thank you, Sophia said quietly as they worked, not just for the weekend but for, she gestured vaguely, for being reliable, showing up when you said you would. Of course, James replied, recognizing how significant this simple acknowledgement was coming from her. How was your weekend? Good, she admitted. I slept for 12 hours straight Friday night. Spent time with Daniel without watching the clock, even played piano for a while yesterday. You played again? James couldn't hide his pleasure at this news. Lily mentioned you hadn't been singing lately. I was worried. Sophia looked surprised, then thoughtful. She notices more than I give her credit for. She loves you very much, James said simply. She hates seeing you tired. A shadow of vulnerability crossed Sophia's face before she quickly masked it. Being a single parent isn't easy, she acknowledged. But we've managed. You've done an incredible job with her, James said sincerely. She's amazing, Sophia, smart, kind, confident. Everything good in her comes from you. Sophia shook her head slightly. Not everything. Her analytical thinking, her curiosity, the way she considers problems from multiple angles, that's all you. The acknowledgement that James could see himself in their daughter, that Sophia recognized his imprint on Lily, despite his absence, felt like a precious gift. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, the tension that had characterized their interactions for years temporarily suspended. As James prepared to leave after saying goodnight to Lily, Sophia walked him to the door. She called you Dad all weekend, James nodded. Is that okay? I didn't suggest it. It's fine. Sophia seemed to be weighing her next words carefully. Daniel is moving to his own place next week. His recovery is going well, but Lily's grown used to having you around. Hope flickered in James's chest. I'm happy to continue helping however I can. Sophia nodded, decision apparently made. Thursdays are always difficult with her dance class and my late faculty meeting. Perhaps you could pick her up regularly. Maybe keep her until after dinner. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, merely a practical arrangement, but James recognized it for the monumental step it represented. I'd like that very much, he said, simply careful not to overwhelm the fragile new understanding between them. As he drove home that night, James felt something he hadn't experienced in 6 years. The sense that he wasn't merely existing, but actually living with purpose and meaning. Beyond atonement for past mistakes, the path forward remained uncertain. The wounds of the past far from healed. But for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that his relationship with his daughter might continue growing, and perhaps someday the broken trust between him and Sophia might begin to mend as well. Chapter 9. Breaking Point. The fragile co-parenting arrangement between James and Sophia had stabilized over the past 6 months. Thursdays had expanded to include occasional weekends, school event attendance, and even joint parent-teacher conferences where they sat side by side, presenting a united front for Lily's benefit, while maintaining careful, emotional distance from each other. Though grateful for his growing role in Lily's life, James remained acutely aware of the boundaries Sophia had established. He never referred to them as a family, never suggested activities that might blur the lines between co-parenting and reconciliation, never presumed upon the tentative trust Sophia had extended. Their interactions remained cordial but formal, the weight of their past hovering between them like an unacknowledged presence. On a crisp autumn morning nearly 7 years after their divorce, James received a call from his assistant while in a business meeting. "Mr. Carver, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an emergency call from Lily's school." James excused himself immediately, heart pounding as he took the call. The school nurse explained that Lily had fallen during recess, possibly fracturing her arm. They'd been unable to reach Sophia, who was at a mandatory training workshop with her phone off. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. James assured her, already heading for his car. At the elementary school, he found Lily in the nurse's office, tear-streaked, but trying to be brave, her left arm stabilized in a makeshift sling. The sight of his daughter in pain stirred something primal in James, a fierce protectiveness he'd never fully experienced before. "Dad," Lily said when she saw him, relief evident in her voice. "It really hurts." "I know, sweetheart," James said gently, signing the release forms the nurse presented. "Let's get you to the doctor right away." At the emergency room, James provided insurance information and contact details, answering questions about Lily's medical history as best he could. When asked about allergies, he gratefully recalled Sophia's detailed notes from their first childcare exchange information he'd memorized, never expecting it would be needed in an emergency. The nurse seemed surprised at his comprehensive knowledge, and James felt a quiet pride in being able to act as a proper father in this crisis. As they waited for X-rays, James continued trying to reach Sophia, leaving messages explaining the situation. Lily, pain medication now taking effect, leaned against him with drowsy trust. Her small hand rested in his, an unconscious gesture of dependence that filled him with both joy and a fierce protectiveness. "You're good at this," she murmured unexpectedly. At what James asked, brushing hair from her forehead, "Being a dad," her matter-of-fact tone made the simple observation all the more powerful. "Even though you didn't get to practice when I was little." The comment, innocent yet piercing, lodged in James's heart. "I'm trying," he managed through sudden emotion. The doctor confirmed a clean break, requiring a cast. Throughout the procedure, James remained by Lily's side, holding her right hand, distracting her with stories from his own childhood, steady in the way he'd never had the opportunity to be for her before. They were preparing to leave when Sophia finally arrived, breathless and clearly distraught. "Lily," she exclaimed, rushing to embrace their daughter before turning to James with a mixture of gratitude and something less identifiable. "Thank you for handling this. The school called my principal when they couldn't reach me, but I was already driving here." "No need to thank me," James replied simply. "I'm her father." Something in his tone must have struck Sophia, because she studied him with new awareness before turning her attention back to Lily's injury. Once discharge papers were completed, they walked together to the parking lot. "I can take her home now," Sophia said clearly, expecting James to relinquish responsibility now that she'd arrived. Actually, James began carefully. "I thought I might come along, help get her settled, maybe pick up dinner so you don't have to cook." He prepared himself for refusal, but Sophia merely nodded after a moment's consideration. "That would be helpful. Thank you." At Sophia's house, they established a comfortable rhythm. James setting up a pillow nest on the couch for Sophia, gathering medications and ice packs, both working around each other with surprising ease. When Lily finally dozed off, exhausted from the day's events, they retreated to the kitchen, voices lowered. "You did everything right today," Sophia acknowledged, setting down 2 cups of tea. "The doctor said you made all the correct decisions." "I was terrified," James admitted, "but I kept asking myself what you would do." Sophia's eyes widened slightly at this, but she said nothing, sipping her tea in thoughtful silence. "She called me Dad at the hospital." James continued, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. "Said I was good at it even without practice." Something shifted in Sophia's expression, then a softening around her eyes, a slight trembling of her usually steady hands. "James, there's something I need to tell you." The seriousness in her tone immediately set him on alert. "What is it?" "I've been offered a teaching position at the National Academy of Music," she said, setting down her cup carefully. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime, prestigious faculty, exceptional resources for Lily's musical education." "That's wonderful," James said sincerely, though confusion colored his response. "Where is it located?" "Boston." The single word landed between them like a physical blow. Boston, hundreds of miles away, far beyond the possibility of Thursday pickups and weekend visits, beyond the careful co-parenting arrangement they'd established. I see. James managed, fighting to keep his voice steady as the implications crystallized. When would you leave next semester? January. Sophia wouldn't meet his eyes. I plan to tell you next week. James felt as though he was drowning, the familiar sensation of losing his family overwhelming him once again. Yet unlike 7 years ago, this time the loss wasn't due to his own terrible actions, but simply life's cruel, ironic timing. Just as he'd finally earned a place in Lily's life, just as they'd established a functional relationship, everything would be uprooted. "You should take it," he said, finally surprising himself with the words, "It's an incredible opportunity for both of you." Now Sophia did look at him, searching his face, as if trying to reconcile this response with the man she'd once known. "You don't want to fight me on this. Legally, you could probably prevent me from taking her out of state." The James of 7 years ago might have done exactly that, leveraged his wealth and power to control the situation, regardless of what was best for Sophia and Lily. The realization that she still expected that response from him was both painful and illuminating. "I would never do that," he said quietly. "Lily's education and your career are important. I would never stand in the way of what's best for her, even if it hurts me." Sophia's composure, maintained so carefully throughout their interactions over the years, finally cracked. To James's shock, tears welled in her eyes, quickly blinked away but unmistakable. "Why couldn't you have been this man when we were married?" she whispered, the question seemingly torn from somewhere deep inside her. Before James could respond, a small voice called from the living room, "Mom, Dad, is everything okay?" They composed themselves quickly, the moment of vulnerability suspended. As they returned to their daughter's side, yet as they cared for Lily throughout the evening, something fundamental had shifted between them. A question asked that could not be unasked. A glimpse of what might have been that could not be unseen. When James finally prepared to leave that night, Sophia walked him to the door, an uncharacteristic hesitation in her manner. "Thank you again for today," she said formally, though the formality felt more like habit than intention. "Call me if she needs anything tonight," James responded, stepping onto the porch. Then, gathering his courage, he added, "And Sophia, about your question earlier, I ask myself the same thing every day." As he drove home, James confronted the reality of their impending separation with a clarity born of hard-earned wisdom. 7 years ago, he'd lost his family through his own cruel actions. Now he faced losing the carefully rebuilt relationship with his daughter through circumstances beyond his control. Yet despite the ache in his chest, he recognized that his love for Lily had evolved from the selfish attachment of his younger self into something purer, a love that prioritized her well-being above his own desires. For the first time, James understood that sometimes loving someone means letting them go. Chapter 10. Hearts Reunited. The months following Sophia's announcement passed with bittersweet intensity. James threw himself into making the most of the limited time, taking Lily on special outings, attending every school event, and even hosting a father-daughter dance in his apartment when she expressed disappointment that her school's event conflicted with Sophia's final interview in Boston. Throughout this time, he never once expressed resentment about the move or made Lily feel guilty about her excitement for their new adventure. His maturity and selflessness did not go unnoticed by Sophia, whose demeanor toward him gradually softened, allowing moments of genuine warmth to penetrate the formal shell she'd maintained for 7 years. As December arrived, bringing with it the reality of their impending separation, James helped pack boxes, research Boston's best pediatricians, and used his connections to ensure Lily would have the smoothest possible transition to her new school. Each selfless action served as an unspoken apology for the selfish man he'd once been, evidence of how thoroughly he'd transformed. On a snowy evening 1 week before their scheduled departure, James arrived at Sophia's house for their planned farewell dinner. Lily greeted him with characteristic enthusiasm, pulling him inside where delicious aromas filled the air. "Mom's making your favorite lasagna," she announced, leading him to the dining room that had been transformed with candles and their best dishes, "and I made the salad all by myself." The care taken with the meal touched James deeply. As they ate, conversation flowed with surprising ease, focusing on happy memories they'd created over the past year, rather than the separation looming before them. After dinner, Lily presented James with a handmade scrapbook. "So you won't forget me," she explained seriously. As if that could ever happen, James replied, voice thick with emotion, as he paged through photographs and drawings documenting their time together. "This is the most precious gift I've ever received. There's a section in the back for new pictures when we visit," Lily continued. "Mom says we can come back for spring break, and you can come to Boston sometimes too." James glanced at Sophia, surprised by this unmentioned plan. She nodded, Slightly confirmation that she'd discussed this possibility with Lily, another small indication of how far they'd come. After helping clear dinner dishes, James noticed Lily yawning despite her attempts to hide her fatigue. "I think someone needs bed," he observed gently. "But it's our last special dinner," Lily protested. Though her drooping eyelids betrayed her exhaustion, "We still have a few more days," James reminded her, "and I'll be here to help with final packing this weekend." After their nighttime routine, now familiar, after months of regular involvement, James tucked Lily into bed, his heart aching at the knowledge that these moments were numbered. The dinosaur nightlight cast a gentle glow across her features, so like Sophia's in repose, yet with hints of his own in the curve of her cheekbones and the set of her brow. He smoothed her curls away from her forehead, marveling at how this small person had become the center of his universe despite the years of separation. "Dad," Lily asked sleepily, her eyes heavy-lidded but focused on his face, "are you sad about us moving?" The directness of the question caught James off guard. Children's perception often surpassed what adults gave them credit for, and Lily had clearly sensed the emotional undercurrents surrounding their impending departure. James considered his answer carefully, wanting to be honest without burdening her with adult complexities. "I'll miss you terribly," he admitted, "but I'm excited for the amazing opportunities you'll have in Boston." "Mom's sad too," Lily murmured, drifting toward sleep. "She cried yesterday when she was packing the photo albums." This unexpected revelation stayed with James as he quietly closed Lily's door and returned to the living room, where Sophia sat on the sofa, glass of wine in hand. She offered him one silently, which he accepted, settling into the armchair across from her. "Thank you for dinner," he said after a moment. "It was perfect." Sophia nodded, studying her wine glass. It seemed important to acknowledge everything properly for Lily's sake, and for ours. For ours, James ventured, surprising himself with the question. Sophia looked up, something unreadable in her expression. "Perhaps for ours as well." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with 7 years of unspoken thoughts. Finally, Sophia set down her glass. "I've been unfair to you," she said quietly. James shook his head immediately. "You've been more than generous allowing me back into Lily's life after what I did." "Not about Lily," Sophia interrupted. "About us, about the possibility of forgiveness." James went very still, afraid to break whatever moment was unfolding between them. "I never expected forgiveness. Sophia, never felt I deserved it." "That's just it," she continued, meeting his gaze directly. "For years I held on to my anger and hurt, because it was safer than acknowledging how much I still cared. I told myself I was protecting Lily, but I was really protecting myself." "From what?" James asked softly. "From the possibility of being hurt again. From admitting that the man you've become is someone I could." She stopped, vulnerability flashing across her features. Could what? James pressed gently when she didn't continue. "Could love again." Sophia finished, her voice barely audible. The admission hung in the air between them, stunning in its honesty. James remained frozen, afraid that any movement might shatter this fragile moment. "Watching you with Lily this past year," Sophia continued, gathering strength, "seeing your patience, your selflessness, your complete lack of expectation or entitlement, it's forced me to recognize how thoroughly you've changed. The man who said those terrible things 7 years ago, he doesn't exist anymore." Sophia. James began, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Please let me finish," she requested. "For 7 years I've carried your words like stones in my heart. They nearly destroyed me, but holding on to that pain is destroying me now." Her voice trembled slightly before steadying. "I don't know what's possible between us, James, but I do know I'm ready to set down that burden." James moved, then crossing to kneel before her, taking her hands in his with reverent care. "I've spent every day of the past 7 years trying to become someone worthy of your forgiveness, never daring to hope for anything more. If friendship is all you can offer, it would be more than I deserve. And if I wanted to explore something more," Sophia asked, her eyes searching his, "what then?" "Then I would consider myself the most fortunate man alive." James answered honestly, "And I would spend every day proving I deserve that second chance." Sophia's hands tightened around his. "Boston complicates things." "Boston is where you and Lily need to be," James replied without hesitation. "We can figure out the rest. I could commute weekends, open an office there, whatever makes sense." A hint of a smile touched Sophia's lips. "You've thought about this." "I've thought of little else," James admitted, "but I never allowed myself to believe it could actually happen." With careful deliberation, Sophia leaned forward, bridging the space between them. Their lips met in a kiss so gentle it nearly brought tears to James's eyes, not passionate but exploratory, tentative, yet undeniably meaningful. When they separated, Sophia rested her forehead against his, eyes closed. "7 years ago I never imagined we'd be here." "Neither did I," James admitted, overwhelmed by the miracle unfolding between them. "But if you're willing to try, I promise I will never give you cause to regret it." "I believe you," Sophia whispered, and those 3 simple words held more healing power than any James had ever heard. They stayed like that for long moments, neither rushing to define what would come next, both recognizing the significance of this threshold they'd crossed. Eventually, Sophia spoke again, practical considerations, asserting themselves. "We should take this slowly for Lily's sake. See how things develop with the distance." "Of course," James agreed immediately. "We have time to figure this out." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a small voice came from the hallway. "Mom, Dad." They turned to find Lily watching them, eyes wide with surprised delight. "Are you two having a date?" she asked, the hopefulness in her voice unmistakable. Sophia extended her hand, inviting their daughter to join them. "We're just talking sweetheart grown-up stuff." "About Boston?" Lily asked, settling between them on the sofa. "About lots of things," James replied carefully, "including how we'll all stay connected after your move." Lily looked between them with the perceptiveness that sometimes startled both parents. "You're not fighting. You look happy." "We are happy," Sophia confirmed, meeting James's gaze over their daughter's head. "We're figuring some things out." This seemed to satisfy Lily, who nestled comfortably between them, seemingly content with this unexpected tableau of family unity. As they sat together, James marveled at the journey that had brought them here, from the cruel words that shattered their marriage to this moment of tentative new beginning. Later, after Lily had been tucked back into bed, James prepared to leave, though with none of the finality he'd expected from this evening. At the door, Sophia's hand rested lightly on his arm. "Boston is still happening," she said, wanting clarity. "This doesn't change Lily's opportunities there." "I would never want it to," James assured her. "Whatever develops between us has to work alongside what's best for her, not instead of it." Sophia nodded, relief evident in her features. "I'll call you tomorrow. We can talk more about possibilities." "I'd like that," James replied, happiness warming him despite the winter chill as he stepped onto the porch. Sophia's voice stopped him once more. "James, thank you for becoming the man I always believed you could be." As he drove home through gently falling snow, James felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in 7 years. The future remained uncertain. Logistical challenges of distance, the careful rebuilding of trust, the integration of their separate lives into something new. But for the first time, that future contained hope, not just for continued co-parenting or occasional visits, but for genuine connection, for the possibility of family in its truest sense. What had begun as the worst mistake of his life had initiated a journey of transformation he would never have chosen, but could no longer regret. Through the crucible of his greatest failure, James Carver had become someone better than he'd ever been before. A man capable of selfless love, a father worthy of his daughter's admiration, and perhaps, if fortune favored him, a partner, deserving of a second chance with the woman he had never stopped loving. As snowflakes danced in his headlights, James whispered a promise to the night. This time he would get it right.